We were labeled hooker patrol and John patrol and drug house patrol kind of thing. But what we really wanted to be was a community association, and to get to that point we needed to give that feeling of safety. We were monitoring the activity and documenting everything. We would speak to the girls, talk to them. It became very obvious to us that they weren't the real problem. They were out here because of the drug trade and their need for crack at the time. But it was the Johns that was the more threatening behavior, because they would creep up on anyone. It didn't matter who you were, how old you were, and they would ask you if you were working, because they couldn't tell someone who was selling themselves for rock, or if you were just a kid walking home from school. Eastside Pride's a community association that works to build a safe and healthy community. In the early days, we did a lot of crime reduction activities because we had so much crime. People were afraid to step out, speak up. What we really wanted to do, our end goal, is to empower people to take ownership of their neighborhood and get involved in their community, and to take pride and not be held hostage by that code of silence that was so prevalent back then. I'm Marjorie Crew, past chair of Eastside Pride, and this is my friend Bev Webster, and she is the current chair of Eastside Pride. And our lend-a-hand projects, like they were always very popular, where we'd fix up a house. Yeah. This is a letter that I sent 20 years ago, complaining about the conditions in our neighborhood. And I read it, I kind of smile because, well, I do kind of laugh because I'm certainly not that person anymore. This was the first article in the newspaper that started everything. My friend Suzanne and myself and my daughter Elisa. And that was the beginning, and residents call crack meeting. Like everything was about the drugs, but it was really about trying to get a sense of safety back. We'd bought this house, and at that point you couldn't sell it. Today we could sell it, but back then you couldn't sell anything. In the beginning, people were afraid to talk to us because they were afraid that they would have a rock thrown through their window or tires slashed. We're now in front of the Royal Tavern, and this is actually where Paul Flint, a young fellow, was murdered here, and in this area, and he was put in a shopping cart in the creek back there. So it had escalated to that point where people were afraid to speak up about it, and when someone in your neighborhood is murdered and people don't want to speak up out of that code of silence and that fear of retaliation, something's wrong. This type of activity will and can grow wherever it's allowed, wherever people don't speak up and you allow that type of negative activity to take over. I don't think it's a Chatham problem. It's a anywhere problem, and it's a community problem. I think associations are more successful and carry more value than the traditional neighborhood watch, because it's about building community. It's about getting out there and having hot dogs and sharing information and just communicating.
Can you tell me about that night?
Yeah, it was scary. This night was the very first night that we walked, and we're walking here with Deputy Chief Carl Herter at the time, who became Chief of Police. Yeah, it was pretty scary. That was our first night that we walked. I think we went out for, 4 or 5 hours, and we weren't sure what we were going to face. And I think that year we logged over 2,000 hours just walking on the street and hanging out in the parks and doing all of those things.
At night?
At night. Occasionally we went out in the daytime. Sometimes we would have the St. Clair College students, law and security students would come out and walk with us. Drugs were found on the street, crack cocaine.
12 years ago while we were renovating our house, and we weren't living in it at the time, so when she was walking by, she was curious what we were doing, so they came in, we talked to them, and they said that, you know, they walk by all the time, they keep an eye on our place for us, knowing that we weren't there during the day. And I said, you know what, when I'm all done this, I'm joining Eastside Pride. So it took us 2 years to renovate, and I've been in Eastside Pride ever since. Now it's just picking up where Marjorie left off, just continuing to do what she's already done. Community partnering, community events.
Fundraising to make sure we can do those things.
That's true, we do a lot of fundraising too. Community building with our partners, it seems to be what our new focus is. I mean, without any partnerships, you can't continue to grow.
There was 3 houses that were here that unfortunately weren't fixed up because of the housing crisis. We sure could have used some houses, but they were condemned, and then the owner demolished them, and he's supposed to leave it in a level and graded condition, and they took them out, but they didn't finish up with the level and grading. So now we have a problem with weeds, which will in turn, it's a mess. So it's a property standard issue, so we'll deal with it through the proper channels. There's a minimum standard that the municipality has set out to maintain your properties in. So sometimes absent landlords don't take as good a care as they should of their property. The other thing is meth. Meth has a whole different characteristic than crack cocaine did.
And mind you, that's not just in our neighborhood. I mean, it's all throughout the municipality. But
yeah, we all feel it.
Yeah.
From thefts to, people that are just, they're homeless, and the visible homeless now, right? We didn't see that a whole lot 20 years ago, but we do now.